The second speaker is going to be Dustin Angell, who his appointment here is Director of Education, but Dustin actually has a professional background in photography, and Dustin at Archbold has elevated our photography, particularly of people, to levels that we never envisioned, never mind articulated. And he's going to talk about, in particular, when you use a wide-angled lens. So Dustin combines his photography skills with his really exceptional education prowess, and we're very lucky to have him working here.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us to learn about photography and think about photography. I have the fortunate job of working at Archbold, where I'm in a nature preserve every day and surrounded by scientists doing all kinds of different interesting projects. And it didn't take me very long after I got here 7 years ago to realize there were a lot of stories that I could tell with photography. And I've got different kinds of lenses to tell those stories with. What I thought I'd do today is talk about, I think, is the most fun kind of lens, which is a wide angle lens. And this is the one that most of the photos I'm going to show you are taken with. When you're looking at pictures, it might seem almost like they just appear spontaneously, right? Wow, that's a great shot. But as you learn about what different lenses do, you'll start to see that the photographer made a specific choice over what lens to use. So I'm going to show you some pictures with wide angle lenses, some without wide angle lenses, and show you the kinds of subject matter you can photograph and how the photo will be different depending on the lens that you use. Before I jump into it, I do want to say that even if you don't have a DSLR like this, you can get a wide angle lens for your cell phone. And this just clips right onto a cell phone. So even if you don't have the money for one of those, this only costs about $30, $40. What is conservation photography? Hillary already did a nice job explaining this. But basically the idea is that it's not just about taking the photo, it's about what you do with the photo. How is your picture going to work? How is it helping conservation? If you love nature, you can use your photos to help support nature. I love the second part of this quote. The nature photograph shows a butterfly on a pretty flower. The conservation photograph shows the same thing, but with a bulldozer coming at it in the background. You can have beautiful photos that are conservation photos, ones that look the same as any other nature photo, but you can also have pictures of things that are ugly. And the talk after this one that Bill gives will be a nice example of photographing some of the upsetting stories about what happens in nature when it gets polluted. Well, I can't really talk about angle photography without talking about what it is, because I know many of you might not actually know what this topic is. There's all different kinds of lenses. You might have heard the term zoom lens before. That just means a lens that can move in and out. Telephoto is one that looks further away. A wide angle is one that lets you see a wide angle. And they're generally shorter barreled. If you imagine a big long lens as looking like a tube, looking through a tube, you're not actually going to see that much. You're just going to see in. So the lens that I have here is actually 15 millimeters, which is an ultra wide angle lens. So I'm going to show you pictures with that and then another lens that's 22. Both of those are very wide. One comment on the part here that says full frame or APS-C. If you don't know what that means, most digital cameras until a couple of years ago had a smaller sensor than the old film 35 millimeter film spot there. So when you attached a 35 millimeter lens onto a digital camera 5 years ago, it was actually being cropped because the sensor wasn't as big as a 35 millimeter piece of film. So you put a 35 on there, and was really a 50. These days, a lot of the cameras coming out are full frame, so the numbers are just becoming regular again. They're not getting cropped. Here's 2 landscape pictures, and not all the pictures I'm going to show are from Florida or have to do specifically with conservation, but just pictures I've taken all over the place. The one on the left is in New York, near Syracuse, New York, where I'm originally from. The one on the right is from Western Canada. So take a look at both of those and try to figure out which one is with the wide angle and which one is the telephoto. You'll notice the one on the left is a bit abstract looking. We don't see the sky. We are kind of, seems like we're looking from far away, looking inward. The one on the right feels more like we are in the space, surrounded by the space. That's because the one on the right is the wide angle. This picture includes both what I love about wide angle, but also one of the challenges or problems with shooting with a wide angle. You can make anything look interesting. It's in some ways, it's the lazy man's camera lens, because just a tiny move this way or that way, and you can really change what your picture looks like. I was just driving down the road in California and stopped and took this. One of the things that I like about wide angle is if you have something interesting in your foreground, in the area closest to you, it will really highlight that, like the X in the road here. But the things that are further in the background don't tend to matter as much. If you don't have something real interesting in the foreground, it's going to look kind of like a flat image, kind of a boring image. And in this case, those mountains back there, which normally might make up their own interesting photo, they're playing second stage to what is in the foreground. Here's a landscape. We're back in Florida here. And this one you can see is 105 millimeters. This is a telephoto. So we can get a nice, idea of what this habitat looks like. It's real pretty. This is at Kissimmee Prairie State Park. But with this one, it feels like we're a little further back again, looking in on it. Now I've got my wide angle and I'm right out there, and I feel like, boom, I'm right in the middle. There's no separation between me and the habitat. I'm repeating myself a little bit here, but that is the main point I want to make with a wide angle, is it gives you this different feel. If you're thinking about the storytelling part of this, I think it matters, because the visuals that you have here are also connected to the emotional tone of your photo. Are we looking from further away, pondering, or are we right in there? It's a little bit like when you're writing, if you use past tense or tense. I think of the wide angles as using present tense. Having a person in the image is always, I love putting people in there. It gives a little bit of a perspective. One thing that's always good in photography is to know where you want the person's eye to go, to have a clear subject. Putting a person in there helps a lot with that. Again, we can see those mountains that are further in the background. In some ways are playing, second string here to the foreground. In this case, I love it. I'm really happy with this picture, because this is an interesting foreground, especially when we put the researchers studying a rare butterfly. This is in the Canadian Rockies. Groups of people. You don't have to just photograph beautiful landscapes with this lens. You can photograph people. So again, we've got 2 pictures. One's with the wide angle, one's with regular telephoto lens. Which is which? Hopefully at this point, it's making sense to you. The one on the left is the wide angle. The one on the right is the telephoto. I like both of these pictures, and what I want you to think about is that you have tools in your toolkit. If you're a musician and you're writing a song, do you play this instrument or do you choose to play that instrument? It's going to give you a different feel. This is a similar thing that's happening. It's people out with their binoculars looking for birds, groups of people. The one on the right has more of a, I don't know, romantic feel with that lighting coming in. We've got our subjects in focus, everything else out of focus, which is normal when you're zooming in. What you notice on the wide angle is everything's in focus. Everything's in focus. In this case, I did bring a couple different lenses out there, and I was switching lenses back and forth, but I ended up really liking the wide angle shot. Wide angle lenses for portraits are tricky because they do provide distortion. And you have to think about what distortion you're going to get. If you get real close to people and photograph them, you might make their nose look like it's growing one way, or their forehead will be really big. So just be aware. But remember, everything is in focus and you can fit a lot in there and you feel like you're very present. And that can be really fun for a portrait too. Usually when I'm doing portraits though, I am zooming in. And the one on the photo on the right of Xochitl is what the portraits I take usually look like, where I'm zooming in on them and having the background go out of focus a bit. But I did want to include the one on the left here of Alicia, because that at first glance looks like maybe it was shot with a wide angle, but you can see it's not. It's at 70 millimeters. So you can get a lot of detail in there with a telephoto lens. But you just have to stand back a lot further. And this also doesn't give us any distortion. Those trees look nice and straight, whereas with the wide angle, they would have been curving a little bit. So actually, when I took that one on the left, I was a little bit surprised, very pleasantly surprised. I was able to get a picture like this using a telephoto. When you want to take photographs of things really close up, you use something called a macro lens. And these are not macro lenses, but you can get very close to things. And sometimes you can use them as if they're a macro lens. But you do have a difference, which is you can play around with everything pretty much being in focus, having a really wide depth of field, a big long depth of field. Now on the one on the left, the background is out of focus because I am right on top of these flowers. I mean, here's the flower. I am, just a couple inches away from it. So there's no way it was going to get to focus on all of that was in the background. But typically with this, if I have it set for the infinity focus, anything that's about 6 feet away and beyond is all in focus. If I'm getting up close and I've got to change my focus to get something nearer, then I'm going to lose those things further away. But even so, you're still going to be able to include them. I love the shot on the right. That's a grizzly bear print in the mud. And I didn't want to just show the print. I wanted to show the habitat that it was in. And for me, wanting to tell stories about science and conservation, it's important to not just show pretty things or just show one subject at a time, but to give it context. This is the type of shot that you just couldn't do without having a wide angle lens. Science in action. I love getting to go out with researchers and I'll say, oh, what are you doing? Let me go out and take pictures. And they'll say, well, we're counting stems or we're cutting up grasses and putting it in a bag. And that doesn't seem very exciting to them. And with a regular lens, it might not even look that exciting. But I'll tell you, when you've got a wide angle lens on, you can make anything look interesting because you can get so close, get right up to people, and then you can, just by moving a little bit one way or another, really play with how their bodies fit inside of your frame, play with those compositions. I just think they're a lot of fun. I like trying different perspectives, being above, a little above people. I love getting right on, just laying on the ground. And with the wide angle, laying on the ground, shooting up at a person makes a great shot. A lot of times with a wide angle, you are going to get a lot of sky in your pictures. And, you know, that might be just negative space, just looking white or gray. It's not always a beautiful blue sky with beautiful clouds. So by getting lower and having that wide angle, you can have, like in the picture on the right, just some grass blades going up, and they end up filling up and doing something interesting with all that negative space. Again, getting right on the ground with the researchers. In the one on the right, that's a nice example of making the viewer feel like you're right there in the scene. Sometimes you want to mix it up a little bit. Here's Greg Thompson with a Florida grasshopper sparrow, and the one on the right, I am right there with him. I've got my camera real low, looking up so I can see it. But, you know, the wide angle is not good for everything. So then I've also got the 122 millimeter there looking at the bird in his hands. Perhaps the best thing about a wide angle is you can shoot anywhere, even in just the back of a truck here. That's the photographer, Carlton Ward Jr. Some people might know him. He's a National Geographic photographer, and he does a lot of work with Archbold. There we can, I'm just sitting in the back seat and I'm able to get all that detail in with a wide angle. You can add visual drama and play with distortion. So the one on the left, that's my wife. We're in a cave, and I could have gotten a cool shot of her just, you know, getting more close up to her. But with that wide angle lens, I was able to put a lot of space around here and really show the size of this cave we're in and how small she looked inside of it. The right is a bowling alley that was destroyed during Hurricane Irma in Sebring, Florida. And I was talking earlier about foreground and wide angle being important because it's really going to be highlighted and even distorted a little bit. So I got low to the ground while photographing this building, and you can see it's distorting it a little bit, but I think in a good way. Again, well, this is doing a couple things. There's a little bit of distortion here. I'm there up close, right there, and I'm able to really play around with how this composition works too. So another example of how you can play with these, you know, make sure you pay attention to what's in the foreground, make it something interesting. Sometimes these might seem even a little bit weird, and maybe they even seem a little too weird to you, but I like the pictures that are a little bit distorted. To me, I just find it interesting. Here's the last picture I want to show you. And this is the one we used for the flyer. I think it is a really good example of what a wide angle does, for better or worse. I love it, but you can see the distortion here is incredible. The horse's head is the same size as his entire body, right? Like the horse's eyeball is the size of his head in this. And it all is in focus mostly, so it's hard to tell like which is supposed to be closer or further away. It's kind of odd and bizarre looking, but I love the composition that it makes. And I like following the lines around, the shapes that it makes. So I want to end with that picture, and hopefully the next time you're looking at photos, you'll start to spot what type of lens they were used with. And I hope you get a chance to play around with a wide angle. And with that, I'll stop sharing my screen. I look